Good afternoon and welcome to How to Build a Multiplayer Game Quickly Using Arrays and Wildcards. I'm pleased to introduce one of our lead developers, Billy Schoenberg, who has been working diligently to bring these new features, especially wildcards, to you to make it much easier to build a multiplayer game.
Thanks, Kareem. Yeah, so this afternoon here, well, we're going to work on putting together a multiplayer game quickly and efficiently. So before we get started, I just want to show you, for those who are unfamiliar with the webinar tools, some basic mechanics about how to get around during today's webinar. There's a little grab tab on the left of the GoToMeeting panel, which allows you to hide or display the control panel and toggle into full screen or windowed mode. The audio controls are in the audio tab, and it allows you to make sure that you can hear me appropriately. There's not going to be any direct audience feedback where we're going to put you on the line, but we are going to have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar where you can enter in any of your questions in the bottom section of the GoToWebinar panel. Any questions that are immediate will be answered immediately. Those which we can answer at the end of the webinar, we will, and all questions will be answered via email. So thanks for joining with us this afternoon. The first thing I want to go with you today is through the topics of what we're going to talk about. And so the first thing I'm going to tell you about today is basic multiplayer game construction techniques. So, how do you build an interface where multiple people can interact together in the same simulated model? From there, we're going to talk a bit more about how we can use wildcards to reuse interface pages across multiple roles. So when I say that word role, what I'm really referring to is a position within the simulation that each of the different players can take. And it can be really advantageous if we have a whole bunch of players who are making more or less the same decisions and looking at more or less the same results to share the same interface page so that you as a simulation author don't have to keep making more and more pages, one for each role. We'll also talk about techniques to make multiplayer games easier to use for users, such as building waiting rooms to make it very clear in what stage of the game each of the players is at, as well as constructing a debriefing screen with the option to replay so that you can expose some of the knowledge of your model directly within the simulation. And then finally, at the end, we're going to do a question and answer session. So the first thing I want to show you today is an overview of the model and the finished interface. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to jump into Google Chrome, where you can take a look here at the simulation that we will build. And so the first thing you see when you're looking at a multiplayer game is the option to enter in a nickname. This, of course, occurs if you're not logged into the isee Exchange. So here I'm going to just enter in my name, and it presents me with a list of sessions that I can join, actively, created sessions that I can join in order to play a game with others. I'm going to make a new one, and I'm going to call it Billy's Session. And so now I'm in it, and I'm waiting for other players to join. In this simulation, there are three roles: Google, Amazon, and Apple, where Apple is a role that doesn't need to be filled by a human in order for the game to proceed. We're only waiting for somebody to take the role of Amazon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the URL, open a new tab, and paste it. And in this tab, I'm going to take on a persona as John Smith. And John Smith now sees the session that I created in the other tab, can join it, and is brought into the game as Amazon. Now that we're both in the game, we can each say that we're ready to start, and the game will begin. The game begins in such a manner that we can see who we are by looking at the name of the company that we are in the upper left-hand corner. We can look at the market share for this product that we're selling. In this case, it's a Chromecast-like device for streaming movies and videos to your TV from your computer. You can see what the unit price is for each of the three companies, as well as a subscription price that we will charge our customers to use our device. On the company info tab, you can see that we have an indicated market share as well as a cumulative profit graph for each individual company. If I enter my John Smith persona in the other tab, you'll see now that I am Amazon, that I'm looking at the same information here on the dashboard. So in this model, some information is shared across all players. Whereas when I go to my company info page, you'll see that my cumulative profit graph is actually going to be showing me cumulative profit for Amazon rather than Google. So the beauty of Wildcards is that it lets us build this page once and change the data that's displayed in it for each of the different roles in the simulation. So as Amazon, I can make the decision to increase my price a lot. I'm going to try and make some money here. And back in my Google persona, what I'm going to do is keep the price of the product cheap, but I'm going to raise the subscription prices. When both players have made a decision, you'll see that the game advances, and that when we go to the company information pages, that we have different profits, and the indicated market share has changed. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and see what we need to do next. The first thing that we're going to do to build this game is to build a dashboard page, to build that first page that we saw with the market share and all of the price information. So this is a shared page. This page is going to be viewable by both of our roles. All players will have access to this page and will start on this page. And what you're going to learn here is how to make a pie chart and how to make a table using numeric display objects. So the first thing I want to show you when we get into Stella Architect is the interface window. Here's where we can build our interfaces. All of the tools that we use to build our interfaces are at the top. Running down the left is a list of thumbnails like you would see in PowerPoint that let you preview each of the pages in your interface. And if we hit the X squared button, we can go and view the model. The model that we're using for this simulation has already been built, and let me explain a couple of key concepts for you inside of it. The first is that here is the decision for price, and price is arrayed by company. So if I go to the array editor within Stella Architect, you can see that I have a single dimension company, which has 3 elements: Google, Amazon, and Apple. Each one of those companies is allowed to set a price and a subscription price. We calculate a number of customers for each of the companies, and we calculate a cumulative profit for each of the companies. There are these other 2 variables here, game advanced and game over, which are going to become very important in later parts of this webinar. The first, game advanced, is either 1 or 0 if the time is divisible by 3 or not, and the game being over is either 1 or 0 if the current time is the last time step. So let's go ahead and go back to the interface using the Open Interface window button and start building our user interface. So like we were saying before in the PowerPoint, the first thing we need to do is create the dashboard. So what I'm going to do to build the dashboard is I'm going to use the graph tool. I'm going to click once on it, click again to place it, and then I'm just going to lay it out on the page more or less roughly where I want. In the top of the panel, the settings panel, which we use to control all of the options for the device that we've just placed, I'm going to choose the pie option to turn this into a pie chart. I then use the green plus to add series to this graph. And what I'm plotting here is the variable called market share. It then asks me, hey, Billy, which market share do you want to put in this graph? Do you want to put the Google market share in the graph, Amazon's, Apple's, all of them? That's what the star means, or question mark. Question mark is an example of a wildcard, which we'll cover later on. In this case, I want all of them, so I'm going to choose the star. At this point now, my pie chart is set up, but I need to clean it up and make it easier for users to understand. The legend being market share bracket Google is a little obtuse for the kind of user that I'm envisioning this simulation being used by. So I'm going to update the legend title of this series to say Google, and then I'll select the next series in the list and change its legend title to Amazon, and then I'm going to change the final one to Apple. When I do this now, you'll see that my legend looks a whole lot nicer and easier to read, but what we're missing is an indication of what this pie chart is showing. So if I hit the wrench down here, which is the settings for my graph, it changes what kinds of options I'm looking at, and it lets me enter in a title for this graph, which is going to be market share. So now we've made our market share graph. The next thing we need to do is build a table of our prices. To do that, we're going to use the numeric display widget. So I click once on it and click again to place it. And using the same old green plus from before, I'm going to choose the variable I want to display, which is going to be actual price for Google. Okay, so now the numeric display has been placed, but it doesn't look exactly the way we want it to look. So we need to do some things to format it the way we want it. The first is going to be to change the title from actual price Google to the word Google. And then we're going to go over to the style panel, which is always represented by the paint roller, to change the way that it looks. The first thing we're going to do is increase the font size to 14 so that it's much more easily read. And then we're going to change the background color from blue to white. Once we've done that, we can give the device a bit more padding around its contents to make something that looks like a cell in a table. So now that I've set up a single table cell, what I'm going to do is duplicate it using Control-C, Control-V, and Control-V one more time to set up our three numeric displays. And then using the layout guides, which are the blue dotted guides, I'm going to make sure that I get these three devices aligned nicely so that they share the same X and width positions, setting up a table. I now need to modify the two widgets that I just copied and pasted to represent the actual price for the two other companies. So rather than using the green plus to select the variable all over again, because I know what the name of the array element is that I'm looking for, I can just type it in directly as Amazon, and I'll make sure to update my label the same way. This third row is going to be Apple, so I'll change Apple and Apple. So now we've created the first column of our table as well as the label column, and what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the numeric display again that we created initially to make the second column in our table to represent the subscription price. This numeric display is going to be a little bit different in that it's not going to show its title. In this way now we can have a numeric display which is just a number on its own surrounded by a box. Here I'm going to use the green plus to select the new variable, and the variable I'm looking for is actual subscription price. And in this case, the actual subscription price for Google. So now that I've got that set up, what I'm going to do is align it such that it becomes the same size as the other table cells. And then I'm going to move it a little bit to the right here. I'm going to copy it and paste it twice, just like I did before. And then I'm going to start changing the variables again. So instead of Google here, I'm going to do Amazon and Amazon. And then I'm going to do Apple and Apple. I'm going to change the variable to refer to Apple and the title to refer to Apple. I'm changing the title even though it's not visible, just in case I ever decide one day to change this interface and make that title visible. The way that I simply align these devices is using the layout guides and my mouse, and whenever I get it close but not perfect, I can use the arrow key to fix any mistakes that I make. In this case, I've been lucky, and I got everything to line up nicely using the layout guides. Now that I've made the whole table, I'm going to select it as a bunch, and by mistake, I grabbed the market share. So I'm going to hit the Shift key and click on the market share graph to deselect it so that I can move this bunch of elements all as one group. Finally, the last thing I need to do is enter in the labels for the two columns, which I'm going to do using a text box. The first column is labeled unit price, where price is on its own row. And what I'm going to do with that is make it a bunch skinnier so that I have an easier time aligning it to my table. And then I'm going to change its font size from 12 to 14 so that it's more easily read, and place it above the column. I'm then going to copy it and paste it and put unit price above the other column. I can double click to edit the text. I'm going to change the word unit to sub for subscription price. We've now created our dashboard page. So let's go back to the PowerPoint to see what comes next. The next thing we're going to do is create a design and navigation template. So just like a slide master in PowerPoint, this template will provide consistent design in our simulation. It's going to be a background, a set of elements that will appear on every page in our simulation. And we're going to use a device called the navigation control in our template to provide a consistent form of navigation between the dashboard and the company information pages. What you're going to learn here is how to create and use a template and how to use a navigation control object. So let's go to Architect and get started. So what I need to do first is to create a placeholder page, a page that will eventually contain the content for my dashboard, which I'm going to do by clicking the Add Page button down here. I'm going to change the name of this page from Page 2 to Dashboard, to Company Info. And I'm going to do the same for Page 1, changing it to say Dashboard. These names here are just to make our lives as simulation authors easier so that we can identify what each of these pages are without having to remember, oh, page 1 is this and page 2 is that. Now that I've done that, I can go into the context menu, which appears above all of the pages, and change the view to show me all of the templates in my simulation. In this case, I have just a blank template, and on this blank template, I want to recreate the simulation design that we saw in the final product. To do that, I'm going to use a widget called the Shape widget, which you can get to behind the drop-down arrow of the graphics frame. So I'm going to choose the Shape widget, and I'm just going to put it in the center of the page. And the first thing I'm going to do is go to the settings, which are the wrench, and I'm going to change it from being transparent to being not transparent, which I'm going to do by setting the color of the background to gray. Very good. And then I'm going to change the border to be solid and 2 pixels thick. And instead of black, if you remember, the color scheme of this interface was gray and red. So I'm going to go to the color picker, and I'm going to choose a nice bright red to use for the border. But now you may be saying, well, the border in the simulation wasn't showing the left and the right and the top. How do we position this object on the page to make it like that? What we're going to do is we're going to go to the style settings where we can change the size and position by hitting this down triangle, and we're going to position this widget manually rather than using the mouse. So this is a handy trick I like to use for making backgrounds. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the X position for this background to be 2 pixels off the screen in the X direction, and in the Y direction I'm going to do the same thing. That cuts off the left border and the top border. The next thing I need to do is cut off the right border, which I can do because I know the width of the page. The page is 800 pixels wide. But instead of entering in 800 as the width, I need to enter in 804 to account for my border on both sides. And the height of this mast should be 60 pixels, but rather than entering in 60, I want to enter in 62 to account for the 2 pixels of border that I've cut off. I've now created the background image, but it can be annoying because I can select it and move it by mistake. So what I'm going to do is lock it in place using the lock checkbox, which means now I can't select it and inadvertently move it by mistake. If I want to change this widget, I can double click on it and then unlock it to move it around again. So now that we've created our background, what I want to do is start creating the title for our simulation, which I'm going to do using the text box, and I'll place that down. I'm just going to type in price war. And the size of this text box I'm going to make as 36, and I'll make the font white, which I think will go nicely with our light gray background. You'll see here that when I put the text box up here, that it's actually hidden behind the shape. To fix that, I can right-click and send it to the front, but now we just see a white box. Why is that? Because the background of our text box is white and it is not transparent. If I make it transparent, we can now see the white text through the gray background. Now that we've done that, we need to set up our navigation. To set up our navigation, we're going to use the navigation control. So I click on the navigation control and click again to place it. And I'm going to come back to the settings panel for it before I set up the styles. And I'm going to add 2 links into the list. And this navigation control is going to appear as a tab bar. I'm going to go to the first link, and I'm going to have that first link bring you to the dashboard. And the second link will bring us to company info. So you can see that it's using the page names by default for the tab titles, but if I wanted to, I could enter in my own label. Now let's style this control. The first thing we want to do is increase the font size to 14 so that everything is nice and readable. And then we want to make the following changes to the colors. The link background color is going to be red, and the selected link text color is going to be the same red. Then the selected link background color is going to be white, and we're going to use a white font color to represent all of the text. So now that we've done that, what we can do is take this device and put it up at the top of our page, aligning it with our border using the arrow keys to create a coherent tab style interface. When we come back to our regular interface by going to the interface menu in the context, you'll see that we're not actually using our template yet. To apply our template, what we need to do is go into the selected page settings and choose template 1, and then apply the current template to the entire interface. Now we see our template is on both pages. But of course we have a problem. We've put our dashboard a little too low on the page, so let's go back to our templates and just quickly arrow it up a bit. And now we have a very nicely aligned set of tabs. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and see what we need to do next. The next thing we need to do is create a reusable player-specific page using wildcards. So the company info page contains information both shared by everyone, as well as information and decisions that are company specific. So you remember, cumulative profit, I can only see for myself, but indicated market share is something that's shared. We're going to use wildcards to take care of the player-specific information. So what you're going to learn here is all about wildcards, making sliders, and using ready-to-advance button actions to control the flow of simulation games. So let's go back to Architect. So let's go to our company information page, and we need to create that indicated market share pie chart. The easiest way for me to do that is going to be to place a new chart down. I was thinking about copying and pasting the other. So I'm going to place a new chart down, and I'm going to make it a pie chart. And what I'm going to do is plot on it the indicated market share for all of the companies. And just like we did in the other chart, I'm going to remake the legend as Google, Amazon, and then Apple. The reason why I didn't copy and paste the other chart was because it was easier for me to type Google, Amazon, and Apple rather than to retype the name of the variable. And so like we did on the other chart, we're going to enter in a title as market share. Very good. So the next thing we need to do is make our cumulative profit graph. We'll do that using the same graph tool, and we'll place that on the corner here. We'll enter in a title for this graph as cumulative profit, and we'll go to the series settings to set up our series. So the series we want in this graph is cumulative profit, but we don't want cumulative profit for all 3 companies, and we don't want cumulative profit for Google or Amazon or Apple. We want cumulative profit for question mark being the wild card that represents the appropriate company. The appropriate company in this place is going to be based on the role that our player has in our multiplayer game. The role is going to either be Google, Amazon, or Apple. In this case, the question mark will be replaced automatically by the simulation engine to represent the company that we are actually playing as. So now that we've set that up, in Architect, by default, it's going to show you, for question mark, the first array element in the array dimension. What I want to do now is remove the legend from this graph, since it's duplicate information, and leave the chart as such. It'll also be nice to change that left axis title from $ to USD, so it isn't so confusing with the $ labels. So now we've created our cumulative profit chart. The final things we need to make on this page are the sliders, which allow us to control price and subscription price. So what I'm going to do is I am going to choose a slider widget and place it down on the page. And I'm going to set up my slider to control the variable called price. And the variable that I want to control in this case isn't price for a specific company, but rather the price of the company that I am playing as. Therefore, I'm going to use a wildcard. So wildcards are usable both on input and output devices. Anywhere where a variable can be specified, a wildcard can be specified as well. Whenever we use sliders, we want to make sure that we enter in the range of values that we're going to be using, because the default 0 to 100 is not necessarily what we're looking for. So the minimum price is going to be $5, and the maximum is going to be $50, and we're going to do that in increments of 50 cents. We then want to arrange the slider so it looks as it did in the interface that we played in the beginning of this simulation, which we're going to do by changing the title side to left and making the slider much longer. Because this slider is set up in such a way that the slider expands to fit the box, as I increase the size of the box, the size of the slider changes with it. Let's finally adjust the title of this slider to just say price. Now that we've done that, let's copy this slider and paste it again and set up our slider for the subscription price. So using the green plus, we'll change the variable to subscription price for question mark, the wildcard, the company that we're playing as. And we're going to change the range from 0 to $15 in increments of 50 cents. We then need to change the label to say subscription price. But you'll see now that we have a problem in that one of our sliders is shorter than the other slider. When building interfaces, it's good if you can control things such that everything aligns to a grid. So we're going to do that by unchecking slider expands to fit and entering in a fixed width for the slider of, let's call it 350 pixels. We'll do the same thing to our other slider, which will ensure then that the two sliders themselves line up in physical space. We'll then increase the number of labels to 5 to increase the density of the labels in both of the two plots. Now we have a pretty good looking set of sliders. The final thing we need to do on this page is make a button to move this game forward in time. We need a way of supplying the users with an action that says they are ready to move forward in time. We're going to do that using the button action, the button tool. And on the button, we're going to add a series of actions. In this case, the action that we're looking for is all the way at the bottom, which is ready to advance. Buttons are capable of doing multiple things. In this case, we want to just do the action called ready to advance. Ready to advance moves the model forward in a specified increment when all players in a multiplayer simulation agree that they are ready to move forward. This is a form of consensus-based time advancement. Other time advancement techniques in multiplayer games include a single user who has control over time and can move it on their own using an action such as run or advance time in ballistic mode. But in this case, that's not what we're looking for. Other ways of moving time forward in multiplayer games include timers and other such devices, which we aren't going to talk about right now. So now that we've set up our button, let's finish it and style it appropriately. The way I like to make my action buttons in Architect is with a flat background and a background color that represents the kind of action that's going to be taken. I like using green for things that push things forward in time, blue for information, and yellow for warnings. That's why I've saved as my custom colors green, blue, and yellow. So I'm going to use green here. I'm then going to change the font to be size 14 to match all of our other font settings. And I'm going to change the button from having black text to white text. And finally, I'm going to make it bold. We've now created a flat material design style button, which I find as something a lot more easily noticed and followed by users of our simulation. So let's go back to the PowerPoint and see what we need to do next. The next thing that we're going to do is set up the multiplayer game and publish it. So we've got to tell Architect that this is a multiplayer game. Essentially, we need to give it all of the role information. We'll then need to test our game to figure out changes we should make in order for it to be more usable. So what you're going to learn here is how to configure multiplayer options and how to test the multiplayer game by yourself. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to conditionally hide and show objects using visibility controls. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first thing that we're going to do is configure our multiplayer options. So let's configure multiplayer options and enable multiplayer. Once we've enabled multiplayer, we have choices about the different kinds of things that we can include. And I want to include chat, but I don't want to do these two other things, which require additional payment. The pause interval for multiplayer, in this case, is going to be 3 months. This simulation runs in months. The number that I specify here is the amount of time that the game moves forward when all players are ready to advance. The next thing I need to do is tell Architect how to set the question mark. The question mark is going to be set based upon the values of the company array dimension. Excuse me. Now what I need to do is set up our roles. Using the green plus, I can enter in a name for my first role, which is going to be Google, and the start page for that role is going to be the dashboard. The variable here that it's referring to is a variable that gets set when this role is active. So I've created a variable in my model called isActive, which I've arrayed by company, and this variable will be 1 or 0 based upon if the player is present or not. This allows me to write automated logic for players which are not filled by a human. This role, Google in this case, must be filled in order for the game to start. It is a required role. I'm going to add my second required role, which is Amazon, and its start page is not company info, is dashboard, and it's also going to set the isActive variable, but it's going to set the isActive variable for Amazon, and this role also must be filled for the game to start. So what I'm saying is that this game must be played by at least 2 players. But when I go to add the third player, Apple, I'm going to say that Apple isn't necessarily required in order for the game to work. So the model, if you study it when we send you the resources after the webinar, will show you how to implement this automated player logic. So I'm going to uncheck that this role must be filled in order for the game to start. So now we have our 3 roles, Google, Amazon, and Apple, and they've been configured such that the question mark will be filled by the role number 1, 2, or 3. We've now set up the 3 roles in our multiplayer game. What I'd really like to do now is set up a little label up here which tells us which company that we are. So I'm going to do that on the template that we created by setting up a series of text boxes. The first text box is going to say Google, and it will be size 20 so that it's nice and easy to see. Then I'm going to size the box to approximately match the size of the word. Then I'm going to copy it and paste it again. The second label will say Amazon, and the third will say Apple. But now what I need to do is control whether or not these labels are visible based upon the role of the user. The way that I can do that is by going to the settings panel and changing what's called the object visibility. So I'm going to open the object visibility panel and I'm going to say this object is visible only for Google. This one is visible only for Amazon. This third one is visible only for Apple. Now that I've done that, I can position these text boxes all directly on top of each other so that the appropriate one shows based upon the user's role. Now that we've set that up, when we come to our interface, we can see that it looks like we're, Apple, but that's just because Apple is on the top. And inside of Architect, it doesn't really know what role we are because we're all roles simultaneously. So all three are showing. So now we need to publish our game in order to effectively test it. We can do that by going to File, Publish. And because I'm already logged in to the isee Exchange, it brings me to my list of simulations. To create an account on the isee Exchange, you can do that from the login page, and you can do that for free. This account is currently separate from your isee Systems account, but we do have plans to combine the two, and there are options for linking them. So what I'm going to do now is add a new simulation. This simulation I'm going to call Price War Webinar. And I could describe this simulation and give it keywords if I wanted to increase its position in the rankings inside of the isee Exchanges directory, but in this case I'm not interested. But in order to publish the simulation for free, I need to agree to the Creative Commons license for my interface, not my model, just my interface, so that I can host it for free. I'm going to add this simulation and then hit the upload button to upload my simulation content to the web. When it's done, I can now scroll into the list of simulations and hit the view link, and this gives me a URL for my simulation, which I'm going to copy and bring into Google Chrome so that we can test this simulation. So now that I've found Google Chrome here, I'm going to close the old simulation and I'm going to paste in the new URL. So you can see here now that just like in the original game, it's prompting me for a nickname. So I'm going to say that I'm Billy, and I have the ability to also create a session. And then I'm going to add a new tab here and paste it. And I'm going to come in as my same alter ego, John Smith. I'm going to join. And now you can see that John Smith is as Amazon and Billy is as Google. Therefore, we are both ready to start the game. And the game has begun. So now we can go to the company info page for each of the two companies. And we can see that I can make a decision here and set price to 25 as John Smith for Amazon. And on the Google page, I can set the price to be $40. And the two prices are not the same price. When I hit the ready button, though, we get what is sometimes user hostile behavior. It's a bit confusing. I hit this ready to start button and it just grays out. Kind of looks like the sim is broken. But what's going on here is I'm waiting for John Smith to hit his ready button so that the game can move forward in time. So let's go back to the PowerPoint to see what we need to do to address these problems. So what we need to do to address this problem is to construct a waiting room and notify users the time has advanced. So we want a waiting room to make it clear when time has moved forward. We want to explicitly let users know the simulation is ready for them to make decisions again. So you're going to learn how to build a waiting room and how to use simulation events to trigger messages. So let's go back into Architect and make that happen. So let's close the isee Exchange and let's go back into our simulation and let's add a page which is going to be the waiting room. The waiting room will use a template, but you'll notice here that the template's a bit confusing because the template has on it this navigation information which we don't want. So what we're going to have to do is split our template up into two different templates. But first, let's construct the rest of the waiting page, and we'll take care of that problem later. So on the waiting page, I want to put a text box which says, waiting on other players to make their decisions. And we'll vaguely center that on the page. We'll make it a bit wider, and we'll increase the font size to 14 like we've been doing everywhere else. Very good. Now what we need to do is put a button on here which allows people to leave the waiting room. To do that, we're going to take the ready button that we've already made, copy it, go back to our waiting room page, and paste without clicking anywhere else. That way the button appears in exactly the same location. And we're going to change the action of this button to be, rather than ready to advance, cancel ready to advance. When the user cancels their ready to advance state, it's going to navigate them then back to the dashboard page. So let's go navigate to page. Actually, let's have it bring them back to the company information page. That's where they inevitably left from. So now we've set that up. So we've made sure to put the cancel ready to advance action first so that we tell Stella that we intend to cancel our desire to move forward in time before we go back to the company information page. That way, just in case somebody is, ready to advance and the simulation moves forward, we don't end up on the wrong page. We're going to have the same issue here in this ready button. Instead of ready to advance now, this button is going to say that we're both ready to advance and bring us into the waiting room. So we need to add a new action and navigate to page. And the page that they navigate to needs to be page 3, which is the waiting room. But we've put this action second. That's problematic because the last person to advance the game is going to mark ready to advance. The game is then going to move forward, and then they're going to be put in the waiting room. That's problematic because they're going to be stuck in the waiting room even though the game has moved forward. So what you need to do is drag and drop the actions so that navigate to page shows up first. So first you go to the waiting room, then you say you're ready to advance. That way the last person who's ready to advance gets to the waiting room and then is kicked out of the waiting room back into the simulation when the game actually moves forward in time. On the waiting room, the reason why we don't want these two tabs here is because users would be able to exit this waiting room by clicking on either one of these tabs, and it would be confusing then when the game moves forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our templates, and we're going to add a page, and this template is going to be the template that contains only the navigation widget. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these tabs and we're going to cut them. And then we're going to go to template 2, and we're going to have template 2 use template 1, and then we're going to paste them back into place. So now what we've done is we've set it up so that template 2 uses template 1, and template 1 doesn't have the tabs on it. So when we go back to our interface now, we're going to see that the tabs disappear from all of the pages. But no, not to worry. We can easily switch this to use template 2 and this one to use template 2, and our tabs are now back. We've now separated out our design and our navigation templates so that we can use them in appropriately different situations. We've now created the ability to go to a waiting room and to be told what other players are doing. What we need to do now is provide a way to leave the waiting room when the game moves forward in time. So if you remember back to the beginning, we had created two variables in the model called game advanced and game over. Game advanced is 0 or 1 based upon whether or not time is divisible by 3. This is what we're going to use to push people out of the waiting room. So we're going to create a simulation event to do that, which you can create using the Simulation Events tab in the panel. And we're going to add an event, and the event is going to be on the variable game advanced. And we're going to set the threshold for this event to 1/2, because you remember the variable goes from 0 to 1. And we care about crossing this threshold when the variable grows larger than 0.5, not when the variable shrinks from 1 back down to 0. We want this event to trigger every single time that threshold is crossed on the upwards direction. And we're going to add an action every time this event is triggered whenever the run was started from the interface window, which is going to happen for everybody. And it's going to say a message, the game has advanced, review your results, and make new decisions. And the final portion of this action is going to be to navigate you back to the dashboard. So now we've created our simulation event, which says when the value of game advanced exceeds 0.5 on each occurrence, navigate you from wherever you are, in this case, the waiting room, back to the dashboard. So let's publish and see how it looks. Whenever we're republishing an interface, we don't have to go through the same process to add a new simulation. We can just find the simulation in the list and hit the Update Interface button. Now that we've done that, we can go back to Google Chrome because our URL hasn't changed at all. And we can refresh and refresh and replay the game, making sure that our waiting room is intact. Okay. And so here I'll be John. So now we'll make a decision. We go through our waiting room. You'll see the label for this button isn't what we're looking for, but we can fix that easily. And now we've seen the process where a message gets shown and we get brought back to the dashboard. Here's an example of the message. So let's go back into Architect and fix that button. To fix the button, we go back to the page, the company info, and we select the button. And rather than having the default label of page 3, we'll have it just say ready. Now we finished this, and let's go back to PowerPoint to see what else we need to do. We need to create a debriefing and an option to replay the game. So after the game is over, we want to reveal the profit for all 3 companies to all of the players. We also want to give people the opportunity to replay the game. What you're going to learn here is how to build a debriefing and how to trigger navigation to it using simulation events. And you're going to learn how to restart a game using the Ready to Start button action. So let's go ahead and implement that. To make our debriefing page, we're going to add a new page, and we're going to have it use the first template without any of the navigation. And on this page, we're going to put the market share graph. So let's take the market share graph off the dashboard, copy it and paste it, and just change it from a pie chart to an area chart, and change the maxed Y value from 200 by default to 100 so that we can see a nice slice of market share over time. Then what we'll do is we'll take our cumulative profit graph here that we've made for a single company and paste it here. And we'll set this graph up so that it is used by all 3 companies. So we'll take that series off and we'll change it to be cumulative profit for star. And now we have a nice line graph of cumulative profit for all 3 companies. And what we'll need to do is quickly show a legend, and we'll change the legend to say the name of the company. Google, Amazon, and Apple. Very good. Now we've created our 2 charts. What we need to do is provide a navigation mechanism to get you to this page. To do that, we're going to use a simulation event. So just like the game advanced event, the game over event is triggered whenever we're at the end of the simulation and moves from 0 to 1. So we want to trigger it once per run or every occurrence of the event. Excuse me, it's the same. And we want to do it if the run was started via the interface window. This action is triggered for everybody. And it's going to say game is over, time to review results, and decide if you want to play again. And that's going to bring us to page 4, which is our debrief page. Finally, what we need to do is set up a button which allows us to restart the game if we want. To do that, let's take a button that we've already set up, this ready button, copy it, go back to the page, paste it, and instead of navigating into a waiting room in this case, we're just going to mark this button as ready to start. And this now has given us a debriefing page. Whenever a game restarts, it's going to bring people to the page specified as the page that the user starts at. So the navigation off of the debrief is taken care of inside the multiplayer options. So let's go back into PowerPoint and answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Billy. So far, there are no questions, but we can wait a few minutes and see what happens. Did you want to show what it might look like at the end?
Certainly. So yes, I apologize. I rushed there a little bit to make sure that I left time for questions and answers at the end. So what I'm going to do now in order to publish this interface is change the simulation specs. By default, this game runs for 24 time units, which is 8 rounds at 3 rounds each time unit. So it takes a really long time to get through the full game. So let's cut it down to 12. That way the game goes a lot quicker. Okay, all right. So let's restore all devices. Very good. Now all of the axes are 12. And then let's publish this interface. Updating it just like we've done in the past. And when it's finally updated, we'll be able to go into Chrome and play the game and see what the debrief looks like. Let's go into Chrome. Okay, so here I'll be Billy, and here I will be John Smith. And let's make sure that the game is appropriately uploaded. For some reason, that seems odd. We'll just hit the update interface button again, just to make sure it's happy.
While we're waiting for that, is there a version of Architect you need to use these features?
Yes, so the wildcard feature and its associated counterpart called placeholders, which is actually even more powerful than this, are available in Stella Architect version 1.8.2 or greater. They're a new feature released in the software recently. So now that our interface is published, we can go ahead and get started. So let's be Billy, and we'll make a new session. Ready and ready. So now if we just push through the game quickly, we'll see that we'll get to our debrief page. The nice thing about these games is that they're all HTML5, therefore they can be played on a variety of devices, including mobile phones and tablets. They just require a modern web browser to function. Okay, and so here we are, we get to the debrief page, And here we would be able to restart the game if we so chose.
Thank you, Billy. First question, is there a way to make the waiting room more entertaining while players wait?
So sure, we could put any device that we want inside that waiting room page. In this case, I made it pretty boring. I just put a single piece of text. But if you wanted to, you could put videos using the video control. And those videos could also be YouTube videos so that they can learn things while they're waiting for other players to move forward in time. Or any other device that you can put on a page. Normally, you could put on this waiting room page. It's just a page in your simulation.
Okay. Next question is, thank you. Can one achieve this wildcard functionality in an earlier version of Architect?
Unfortunately, no. This wildcard functionality, these question mark variables, are something new that was added and represent a fairly extensive update inside of the authoring tools for multiplayer simulation games. The way that you would build a multiplayer game like this without wildcards was covered in our last multiplayer gaming webinar, which required that there be a company information page made for every specific company. And it makes the navigation that much more complicated.
Thank you. And there's another question. Whoops, hang on, it just went off the page. Is there a feature to test the game without publishing it online? Maybe an offline preview?
Unfortunately, there isn't. The reason for that is because Architect itself has no way of determining which role you're testing and doesn't have the ability to present multiple versions of the same interface as different roles. At the moment, the only way to test multiplayer game interfaces is to do it online. There are options, though, for people who don't want to make their games public, that we offer forms of private hosting, which would allow you to do all of your testing in private. And then when you're finally happy with the product, turn it on and make it available to those who want to have access to it.
Great, thank you. So there's a more difficult question that you may not be able to answer because you covered a lot of this already, but someone is asking if they want to have players with different roles, such as the manufacturer, the distributor, the retailer. Do they need to create different templates? And how do they assign the players when they join?
So you don't have to use many different kinds of templates for many different kinds of roles. Templates I use as a way to provide a consistent design and theming across my pages in my simulation. Now, if, let's say, you have roles that aren't symmetric, so in this case, we have symmetric roles. That means they have the same kinds of decisions and look at the same kinds of outputs. If you have non-symmetric roles, let's say this was a government simulation, and there was one person playing the president, one person playing the minister of defense, one person playing the minister of education. You can imagine that they would have many different kinds of decisions and indicators they're looking at. In that case, then, I might look to build one template, which provides the look and feel for the entire simulation, and then specializations of that template, which provide the appropriate look and feel for each of my different roles. The second part of the question, we do offer two kinds of player assignment. Thank you, Hillary. The first player assignment kind is what you saw, which is teams and roles being created on the fly, meaning they're all self-organized. We offer as a add-on to published simulations the ability to do prepared team and role assignment. That means you as the simulation author can decide which people play with which other people. And when they log into the simulation, they don't have the ability to create new sessions on the fly like that. They're put into a session that you as the simulation author have specifically designed.
Thank you, Billy. How much work does it take to change Google to Facebook in this interface?
So in this interface, it would be pretty much no work. What we could do if we wanted to be extremely thorough is go through in the array editor and rename this word Google here to Facebook. And then every time we typed in the word Google into the interface, for instance, as legends, change that to be the word Facebook, and then this interface would appear as Facebook, Amazon, and Apple. If we wanted to take a shortcut, we could actually leave the variables as Google, Amazon, and Apple, but just change the legend titles of any appropriate graphs anywhere where it referred to Google to refer to Facebook.
Can you explain any constraints or requirements for publishing?
Certainly. The constraints for publishing multiplayer games are listed here for free. So multiplayer games that are published to the exchange without charge under the Creative Commons license require 2 roles that are required. There has to be 2 players. And then the number of variables in the model multiplied by the number of DTs must be less than 20,000. This is our way of approximating the data requirements for your model, which is something that we directly pay for when we host these models. We're willing to cover those costs if you're willing to make your work public under the Creative Commons at models of less than 20,000 for this number. But models over 20,000 represent larger models, typically models with a large number of variables or very long time durations. And those models are cost prohibitive for us to host for free, and therefore we require payment to host those models.
Thank you, Billy. There's another question about the waiting rooms. Can you avoid the waiting room or give feedback about the information so people can think about their next move while they're waiting for the other person?
Certainly. So the message here that just says waiting on other players to make their decision could be a lot more complex and specified based upon who the user is. So just like we use the object visibility controls to control whether or not this text box in the upper left said Apple, Amazon, or Google, we could use the object visibility controls to control what the text box says. The text box could say something based upon if you're Apple, or if you're Amazon, or if you're Google, and say different things.
Great, thank you. That's the end of our questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us here this afternoon and for watching along as we've built this game. We'll make sure to make a video of this webinar available and answer any questions which we haven't fully covered via email.